The headlights caught something moving in the snow. Two shapes pressed so tightly together they looked like one dying thing trying to become two. By the time the rescuers understood what they were seeing, the blizzard had already buried the tracks that brought them there. The call had come in just after dawn. Hikers had reported injured lynxes on the old forestry road, though the description was vague, something about animals that wouldn't move, wouldn't run, the kind of report that could mean anything or nothing. But the storm was worsening, and if there was even a chance something was alive out there, the team had no choice but to go. The truck crawled forward through sheets of white. Wind tore through the pines, snapping branches that clattered against the roof like warning shots. Visibility dropped to 15 feet, then 10. The driver kept one hand on the wheel and the other shading his eyes, searching for movement that might not be there. It was the passenger who saw them first, a flash of tawny fur against the snow, half buried in a hollow beneath a fallen spruce. She pointed without speaking, and the driver eased the truck to a stop, engine idling low and rough. They approached on foot, boots sinking deep. The wind stole their voices. One of the rescuers knelt, brushing snow away with gloved hands, and that's when the picture came into focus. Two bobcats, curled into each other like parentheses around an empty space. One larger, one smaller, neither moving. At first they assumed the larger one had died protecting the other. It happened that way sometimes, nature's cruelty dressed up as loyalty, but when the rescuer placed a hand against the female's side, she felt it, a faint, stuttering tremor, a heartbeat, and then beneath her palm, another shiver from the smaller male pressed against her belly. Both alive. The team moved quickly but carefully, lifting them into thermal blankets. The animals were skeletal, their ribs pressing sharp against matted fur. Frostbite blackened the edges of their ears. Their eyes, half open, reflected nothing. No fear, no recognition, just the dull glaze of exhaustion that looked too much like surrender. But when they tried to separate them into carriers, the female tensed, her body went rigid, muscles locking even in her weakened state. She pressed tighter against the smaller bobcat, a low sound rumbling in her chest. Not a growl, but something softer. Refusal. The rescuers exchanged glances. They'd seen bonded pairs before, but this felt different, desperate, like she believed letting go meant losing everything. Eventually they managed to ease them apart, one into each carrier, lined with heated pads and soft towels. The truck's heater roared to life as they climbed back inside, shaking snow from their coats. The driver shifted into gear, and the forest swallowed them again, the road ahead invisible except for what the headlights could claim from the storm. In the back the female began to shift. At first it was subtle, a restless repositioning, her paws kneading against the blanket. Then her breathing changed, shallow and uneven, her sides rising and falling in a rhythm that didn't match rest. The rescuer seated beside the carriers leaned closer, watching. The bobcat's body tensed, released, tensed again. Her mouth opened slightly, a soundless pant, and then, soft, almost inaudible beneath the engine's rumble, a grunt, low and guttural, instinctive. The rescuer's stomach dropped. "She's in labor," she said, voice barely above a whisper. The driver glanced back, eyes wide. Now, the truck didn't speed up. There was nowhere to speed to, and the road was too dangerous. But the air inside shifted, charged with something fragile and urgent. The rescuer kept her hand near the carrier, not touching, just present, watching the female's flanks heave, counting breaths, hoping. Minutes stretched. The storm pressed against the windows. The smaller male in the other carrier remained still, nose pointed toward her, as if he knew. And then the realization settled over them, quiet and heavy as the snow outside. This wasn't just a rescue of two starving bobcats caught in a blizzard. This was something else entirely. She hadn't been shielding a companion. She'd been shielding her unborn kittens. The truck pushed through the white, carrying them all toward warmth, toward light, toward a chance none of them had expected to find. Behind them the forest waited, silent, indifferent, vast. Ahead, in a small wildlife center that smelled of hay and antiseptic and hope, 3 lives were about to begin in the same breath that 2 others were saved. But no one in that truck could have known yet just how close the margins would be. How many minutes separated survival from loss? How much weight a single decision could carry when measured against the heartbeat of something wild and fragile and fighting to live? The female's breathing hitched again, her body curled inward, and the road kept winding, disappearing into snow. The wildlife center felt impossibly warm after the cold. The team worked quickly, hands steady despite the urgency humming beneath their skin. They laid the female, later named Mara, on heated pads, wrapping her in fresh towels that smelled like detergent and safety. IV fluids dripped slowly into her veins, fighting dehydration and shock. The smaller male was placed in an adjacent enclosure, close enough to see her, close enough to know she was still there. Within hours, Mara's labor intensified. Her body, already pushed to the edge by starvation and hypothermia, strained against itself. Every contraction looked like it might be the last thing she could give. Her breathing came in shallow bursts, sides heaving, muscles trembling. The rescuers gathered around her enclosure in near silence, whispering soft encouragements as if she could hear, as if words could will her through this. The companion Bobcat paced restlessly in the neighboring space, low growls rumbling in his throat. He pressed his nose against the mesh barrier, eyes locked on her, refusing to settle. His agitation mirrored theirs, this fragile, helpless waiting. Every minute felt like a gamble. The room held its breath. Then, a sound, small, fragile, a kitten's cry, barely louder than a whisper. Mara shifted, and there it was, a tiny form in the straw, trembling and wet, no bigger than a human hand. The rescuers didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as Mara, exhausted beyond measure, turned her head and began to clean the kitten with slow, deliberate strokes of her tongue. Then another cry. A second kitten emerged, just as small, just as impossibly alive. And then a third. 3 kittens, all breathing, all moving. The room filled with something unnameable, not celebration, not relief exactly, but a kind of quiet awe that made throats tight and eyes burn. No one applauded, no one cheered. They simply stood there watching a wild mother do what mothers do, even when everything should have been impossible. One rescuer wiped her eyes quickly, turning away. Another exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The companion male finally settled, lying down near the barrier, his gaze still fixed on Mara and the tiny lives she'd brought into the world. It felt sacred, a birth born not from luck, but from the smallest margins. Minutes of timing, human compassion, meeting wild instinct, warmth arriving just before cold claimed everything. Mara lay still, her body finally at rest. 3 kittens nestled against her belly, her eyes closed slowly, not in defeat, but in something that looked almost like peace. She'd been seconds from death, frozen, starving, forgotten by the storm, yet somehow she had chosen life, and life, impossibly, had chosen her back. Weeks passed, and the shelter transformed. Mara grew stronger, her ribs no longer pressing sharp against her sides, her movements steadier. The kittens, once fragile trembling things, became small tumbling forces of energy, pouncing on shadows, wrestling each other in the straw, testing tiny claws against everything they could reach. The companion male became their silent guardian. He never entered their enclosure, but he never left it either. Day after day, he lay near the barrier, watching. Sometimes he chirped softly, a low, gentle sound that Mara seemed to understand. When the kittens ventured close to the mesh, he would press his nose forward, patient and still, as if teaching them something no human could name. The rescue team began documenting everything. Mara teaching her cubs to stalk, low bellies, slow steps, eyes locked on a feather toy dragged across the floor, teaching them to hide when startled, to flatten into corners, to trust their instincts, teaching them to climb, claws gripping wood, bodies learning balance and height. Someone started calling them the Snow Family, and the name stuck. The rehab center, once quiet and routine, filled with new energy. Caretakers found excuses to linger near the enclosures. They arrived early, stayed late, just to watch. There was something about this family, something that felt less like work and more like privilege. But as the kittens grew, so did the weight of what came next. Their home could not be human walls. It never could be. The team began preparing them for release, moving the family to a larger outdoor enclosure designed to mimic the wild. Natural cover, rough terrain, space to roam and hunt and remember what they were. Mara adapted quickly, her body remembering what captivity had tried to make her forget. The kittens followed her lead, learning to navigate fallen logs, to stalk live prey, to understand that survival meant more than warmth and safety. The companion male joined them, and together they became what they'd always been beneath the rescue, a family shaped by instinct, not intervention. The emotional stakes rose quietly, like water creeping higher. The caretakers felt it most when Mara looked at them through the fence. Her gaze wasn't fearful or dependent. It was something else, something that felt like recognition, like trust held lightly, without weight. She knew they had saved her, but she also knew she didn't belong to them. It wasn't dependence, it was understanding, and understanding, they realized, meant letting go. Some bonds aren't meant to be broken, only honored, and honoring this one meant giving her back the world that had nearly taken everything, trusting that this time she was strong enough to take it back. Spring arrived like a promise kept. The forest that had nearly claimed them was alive again, snowmelt feeding streams, undergrowth thick with new growth, the air soft and full of birdsong. The rescue truck climbed a winding dirt road to a ridge overlooking endless green, and when it stopped, the engine ticking into silence, the world felt impossibly still. The doors opened, fresh air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. Mara stepped out first, paws meeting ground she remembered in her bones. She paused at the threshold, head lifted, nostrils flaring. Behind her, the three kittens, no longer fragile, no longer uncertain, followed close, their movements cautious but curious. The companion male emerged last, steady and watchful as always. For a long moment, none of them moved. They simply stood there, absorbing the forest, letting it absorb them back. Then Mara took another step, and another. The kittens fell into line behind her, instinct guiding them now more than memory. The male joined, and together they walked toward the tree line, their spotted coats catching fragments of sunlight through the canopy. The rescuers stood by the truck, hands empty, hearts full and breaking at the same time. No one spoke. There was nothing to say that the moment didn't already hold. Mara glanced back once, not at them but toward the road, the truck, the life that had saved hers. Then she turned forward again and kept walking. The forest swallowed them slowly, their tawny forms fading into dappled light and shadow until they were indistinguishable from the wild itself. The rescuers stayed until there was nothing left to see. Then they climbed back into the truck and drove away, the forest reclaiming its silence behind them. Weeks later, a motion-triggered camera hidden deep in the territory captured them. Mara leading her young through a clearing, moving with the confidence of an animal who knew where she belonged. The kittens, larger now, followed her lead, stalking, playing, learning. The companion male walked beside them, his presence steady and sure. The footage played on a laptop screen late one night in the wildlife center. Two rescuers watched in the quiet dark, the blue glow of the monitor lighting their faces. One smiled, the other wiped her eyes. Both understood what they were witnessing, not just survival but triumph, not just rescue, but reclamation. Mara had been rescued once, pulled from the edge of death by human hands and human hope. But what she truly needed, what she'd fought for through frozen snow and impossible birth and weeks of recovery, was the chance to rescue her own, to choose life, to protect it, to lead it back into the world where it belonged, and she had.